There we go. It's better with both of us. Good morning. Welcome to the Dev Talk Show. It is Friday, February. No, it's March 7th.
Yeah, it is not
It's a
February.
whole week later. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us. We got some cool things to talk about this morning. But as always, joining me is Chris Gomez. Hey, morning, Chris.
Yep. Good morning, everybody. How's it going? It is Friday. I actually had to stop and think about even though I think I knew, but it is Friday and the show producer is already growling at us. Maybe it's because he's excited. Maybe he's excited about what we have to talk today. If people have seen the title.
Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes to kind of run through all of that. So yeah, we hopefully, we definitely have something that Chris got something that's working. So I think we want to kind of start there and show that off. But I think if we could take a bit of something that I thought was kind of interesting, because we're kind of focusing on the identity stuff, because that's something we talk about a lot here. But we also have had sessions we've done, and we can get back to them as well, where we talked about AI and some of the AI capabilities that are there. And what I'm going to do is, let's see if I can find the right one. This is my, let's see how that's working. Sorry, I got to arrange screens. Okay. So this is coming from a blog post that is here. And this is from the Dev Blogs, a new AI template that is available from the Visual Studio team. So this is essentially gives the ability to very quickly create AI chat web application. And there are some really quick steps in here to kind of get that up and running. I'm going to see just real quick if we can take a look at that and go through a couple steps. So I've already done the template install. So what that means is that there is this template that you have, extensions AI template that you would do an install of that. And when you do, you end up getting your own chat web app template inside of there. And if we go ahead and do the .NET new list, you'll see we now have another choice inside of here. Of course, I passed by it, didn't I?
Oh, I think I saw it. AI chat web app. It's hiding after Maui.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's it there. So cool. So we could run that there. We could also, and this I haven't tried yet, but we can see, oh, there it is right here at the top.
Yeah.
So, and then from here, there's actually a little bit of a wizard that steps you through some things. I'm just going to go next on this. And then it asks you, and we've seen the different models that we provided, right? So we've worked with GitHub models, but you can bring other models like things that we have over in the Azure OpenAI space, or you can have, if you have your own local version of models, you can use those, or actually over on the OpenAI platform themselves. So a whole bunch of capabilities to get you up and started. If I do that and just hit create, and I will be bold and hit the F5 and see what it does. It probably won't get too far because I didn't, come to think of it, I don't have the model connected.
I think I missed. I might have been looking away. Was this? Did you add these project templates? Is that what you did?
So just by doing the extensions, doing that .NET add extensions AI that we did over here, that brings in that template, and that template's available anywhere in the .NET side.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I think I missed when you did that. I think I was looking away, but certainly I feel like we don't see this a lot in the wild. And I think it should be noted that there are a lot of these template packages that can be installed, and it's really cool how in .NET, this modern .NET, I don't know how long this has worked. I can't tell you how many versions of .NET you can go back and this worked, where it doesn't just add it here at the command line with the .NET CLI, it works in Visual Studio. So that just kind of goes to my whole, I feel like the team has been the tooling team for ASP.NET I suppose that's the right team. If I've called out the wrong team, I'm sorry. Has been working so hard to unify this so that Visual Studio is less magical, and the .NET CLI is the basis for like everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really been cool. So
yeah, and
yeah,
it makes it extensible, right? It doesn't have to be all the templates in the box when we launch it on a monthly on the kind of monthly cadence that the Visual Studio team does with the IDE, right? You could bring in those things, especially some of those right now that are still extensions and experimental, or not, I guess a little bit experimental, but yeah. So I think it's just, hey, if you want to get started in AI, here's a really quick template to get up and running and get going, and then you can show off, start having that conversation with whatever model you want to use. And that's probably why I shouldn't have started the F5, because you do have to connect up to a model. That's one of the first things you've got to do. So maybe we'll do a short video that kind of goes through those whole steps.
No,
cool.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right, that's cool. I mean, there's been a lot of neat stuff going on lately, and and I haven't been able to keep up with the .NET channel on YouTube, where there's actually been a lot of recent community stand-ups, or just they have more than just the community stand-up. There's routine videos with sometimes they're kind of routine with people that and then other times just some new video series start. And there's been a lot of new content lately that I have not been able to keep up with. So looking forward to getting back to that. But it was the end. For folks who watch the show a lot, know it was the end of hockey season. The last regular practice was last week. So now I don't know what I'm going to do with my time. Actually, I do know. We'll probably catch up on .NET. So
exactly, yeah. And the cool thing is that with all those community channels that are up there, the .NET team has been planning, what they're going to do with .NET 10.
Yes.
There's been a lot of sessions that have been focused on that, and those conversations and how you can give your feedback and what you want to see in it.
And there's a whole video that we should probably bring up and include in the show notes, planning the authentication story for .NET 10, which I know we have feedback. So to getting ready to jump in there and
did you do that? Nope.
But it said my audio was removed. Oh, I see that it takes me off stage. Okay. Using a new feature of StreamYard here. It's one that allows us to do this, but do it all in one motion, where in the past, if you've watched our show, you've noticed it's been a little choppy. But we've also look, don't get me wrong. I think we both have production values, but we also want to get shows out, right? Exactly. So we're kind of like, well, if it's not perfect, it's not perfect. So I'm going to share my screen. Here's what we're going to do. I have been thinking, you heard it this morning, Rich. I'm trying to think of how to do this in a way that folks walk away after today's show and feel like they can actually take it to work. But it builds on a lot of work we've done in the past, some of it a long time ago. Possibly our most popular video on the channel is Blazor web authentication with Entra ID. I actually think it is the most popular video. I'm going to double check real quick. But I think it's the most popular show, and for good, yes, Blazor at Work with Entra ID, most popular show, over 6,000 views. Thank you all for watching it. But
it hasn't been. Has it been a year?
It's not quite a year. We did that one on April 17th of last year.
Okay, not quite a year.
But it was
and we've been doing this for 5 years, and that's our best show.
It was, it's probably the most popular one. It was a topic that I thought people would need at work. You use this stuff. Where's a place where you might use it? You might start by building an internal app. You're doing this app. You even figure out how to sign someone in to your Entra ID tenant at your workplace, and you say, this is great. And what's the next thing you probably want to do is, we should have that user's photo in the upper right corner, so that That way, they know they're logged in. Like, that's how we kind of know we're logged into websites. I'm not trying to say this isn't a show about UX design, but it's a common thing. And wow, did that turn out to expose a lot of interesting issues, right? So I'm going to start by I'm not going to rehash it all. We may have to continue working on this, and we definitely want to get this into a GitHub repo. But the state in which the code is in, I wasn't comfortable with putting up on GitHub yet, because I always fear that code on GitHub might be taken as production ready.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of poking around that is being done here.
Definitely. So just before you jump into it, thanks, Alan, for coming back. We're trying to get this question answered. We've been diligently working on it. Actually, Chris, behind the scenes there, and I think that's the original.
That was the original comment where we said, you know what? Me too.
Right.
I agree. So
definitely, and just to, I would say. For this comment, we don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We'd rather get a show up and say, hey, it's a little rough, but we got there. It's not how we code when we do production stuff, for sure.
No.
There's a difference. These are like,
but I think
this is like a rapid prototype versus production code.
I'd like to think, and I'm pretty sure that Leotac is messing with us a little bit. And you're right.
Of course.
You're right. Believe me, we talk about the production of the show and how to improve it. And we use StreamYard as for expediency, but that may not always be the case. So what do I have that we're going to run through as quickly as I possibly can? How many of us just create a new Blazor web app, especially once .NET 8 came out? I'm going to go ahead and let this be Blazor app 1, but I don't need it to be that deep in here. And then when we create this web app, last year we spent a lot of time in .NET 8 doing this stuff, and .NET 9. And what we did a lot of on the show is authentication type choices are bare, none individual accounts. And one of the things that I really hit on, as you know, Rich, was when we compared the two projects, and we said, what do you get when you don't put any authentication type in? And what do you get when you get individual accounts? One of the first words that came out of my mouth, you probably remember, is, look at this. You get this account folder and all this code. And that immediately caught my attention, because I said, whoa. What is all this in my project? Yeah. Here you go. It's yours now.
Yep.
And so,
and we saw that by going through and looking and seeing where the namespace is. It's not, Microsoft or the extensions over there. It is Blazor app 1 dot.
Yep.
Whatever, right?
There would be many times as we are going through program CS that I would ask the question, is this in the box? And the way we would figure out if something's in the box, just out of curiosity, just to give you one example, we know AdRaiser components is in the box, but that's not the point of the sample. The point is to say, if I look here where it says Microsoft ASP.NET Core components, oh, okay, this is part of the framework, part of the platform. I try not to use the word framework because we have a framework. It's .NET framework.
It's a little different.
Yeah, I know. It's hard. But
it's hard.
Yeah, naming is hard. But what if I move down here to map additional identity endpoints and say, oh, okay, map additional identity endpoints. Let's go ahead and go to implementation. And you start thinking to yourself like, oh, okay. You start thinking to yourself, I'm pretty sure about this anyway. Yeah. If you come into this folder, into this file, and to look at what map additional identity endpoints does, you might even stop here and say, oh, yes, this must be in the box. And then you go to Solution Explorer and click one of my favorite buttons, which is this Sync with Active Document button. And no, you own these endpoints. These endpoints that allow the callback from, well, they don't just allow the callback. They're endpoints that get called by your application to go perform these different duties, including configuring external auth and just all the different things that just come for quote unquote for free in your application. Now, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but one of the things that I say a lot is this is your code now.
Right.
You own it. You're going to commit it to your source control. Now, we could have a whole discussion, and it's totally fair to say that. So same with all the NuGet packages that you rely on too. That whole stream is your code too. That's why supply chain attacks are so important to be aware of. And at the same time, just knowing what the heck's going on in the code, just as many layers below as makes sense. Like you don't need to go all the way back to the beginning, but even a layer below sometimes, because you own it. That's yours. You're relying on it. We're not going to do this here. The sample that you get out of the box uses Entity Framework Core and identity cookies. That's what a lot of these things are doing, to allow you to create a sign-in experience for what they call individual accounts. Your application is going to manage these accounts. When you sign in and create an account with an email address, that has use one place and one place only in this application, unless theoretically you hooked up another application to the same database. But let's say, I mean, how many apps are sitting out there in the world with an ID database here, an identity database there, an identity database there, and login after login after login? Yep. And I didn't want that. I wanted to sign in with a standard external login. So we got that working. We did that.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. There is a whole page of samples. External logins, ASP.NET Core, I think is going to give me a hit here. Use Microsoft external login setup with ASP.NET Core. And you even get over here, Google Authentication, Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter are all in the docs. Mm-hmm. And it basically just teaches you that they're almost all very similar. You're probably going to go create an app in some admin center, like say Google's or Microsoft's Entra ID. And then you're going to use that secret in user secrets, and then you'll sign people in, and then you're excited. You're like, this is great. You might start going through and stripping out the pieces you don't want. Maybe you don't want that sign-in code, so you strip it out. It gets stored into a database for you, which is great. One thing we haven't done on this show is maybe switch from a different database provider. We're using EF because it's in the box. Some people might say, well, wait a second, I want to use something else. Well, you can, but we haven't done that yet. Now, that gets us back to the question that was asked. Awesome. How do I get the photo?
Right.
And it turns out that's a harder. It turns out to be kind of a harder problem than you might think. I'm going to try to, let's see if I can bring up. This is where I hope it doesn't feel like skipping around. Please stop us if it does, or at least, throw it in the comments, ask a question.
Yep. And that Blazor Auth from scratch, that is or is not. I know you talked about the final solution not being out there, but
this isn't it.
There was one of them. Okay. I thought
no, this isn't it.
That on GitHub. That's the only reason I asked.
Blazor Auth from scratch is on GitHub, but it's not in this form right now.
Okay, fair enough.
This was our application where we on the homepage we put 4 ways to log in. Mm-hmm. One of them is using the sign-in manager, which is a next step of this. Is that you can strip this down to where you're really doing stuff on your own, but there's some. I also want to build back up and say, well, we don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? Like sign-in manager, user manager could be very valuable to us. We just might have to implement them differently from the defaults.
Sure.
And at the same time, these external logins have underlying code as well. So I have an Entra ID tenant, which I think I can show very quickly. I have in this tenant, I have created a few users. I don't think I'm too concerned about showing these users. One of them is actually my personal Microsoft account, but it is it has been added to this directory. I just wanted to see how that worked. So we know how that works. The other two are created users. So this might be someone in your organization. And what you might notice is one of them has a photo defined and the other two don't. That becomes important later.
Okay.
Because you actually need to make sure that the photo is defined so that you don't blow up. Now, I can, since I am in my Edge browser that I use all the time. When I click login, it's just going to go ahead. Let me see if I can just jump through. I must have a lot more breakpoints than I realized. I'm logged in, and that works great. But what we often do a lot on the show is we want to bring up that user with the photo. So if I bring up an in private browser and say login with Microsoft, and I don't think I need this breakpoint. Well, I'm going to try to eliminate the ones I don't think I really need that much here. This one's going to do the challenge. This is now going to redirect to the auth endpoint. And these are all sitting in OAuthHandler.cs, which we're going to actually go talk about. This is in the box code that's handling the challenge. And so as you can imagine, I went through this code to try and figure out what the heck is going on and why it was harder than we thought to do this. But or at least it's just not straightforward. So here's my example user that does have a photo. They have a password, which is going to get pasted in that way, which is fine. And what happens is, I'm sure I'm sitting on a breakpoint. Okay, so in OAuth Handler, they have exchange code async, which is basically what this is doing a little bit of stuff. It is getting an access token. And so let's see, here's the token endpoint that it's using, login Microsoft Online. This might look familiar. This is the token endpoint for a single tenant. Okay, so that didn't surprise me too much. I'm like, okay, it's going to the single tenant token endpoint. We configured that. Yeah. So, okay, that's no big thing. Now, a little bit later, you end up in a method called handle remote authentication async, where it starts creating an identity. It creates a claims identity. And if you have save token set, it is going to save off the access token that it used, the refresh token, if you ask for it, and the token type. So it saves this stuff off that you can actually use later. But here's the trick. Create ticket async is where it's actually going to go out and create the claims identity that's going to end up being your user for the rest of the application.
Okay.
So let me jump through here. Create ticket async. Now notice where create ticket async is. This is sitting in the Microsoft specific handler. The Microsoft account handler derives off of the more generic OAuth handler. So the OAuth handler knows how to do OAuth challenges. The Microsoft handler that derives off of it knows how to do specific things for, maybe there's some tweaky things in your OAuth path. I've noticed as I looked through the other handlers that there might be little changes here and there, but it also knows how to deal. Remember how we talked about this last time or recently? It knows how to deal with the JSON that comes back.
Right.
So the JSON that comes back doesn't have a picture in it, but this is a Google version. The Google one, they throw it in. And not only do they throw it in as a link. So you can just slap that link into your HTML, boom, you're done.
Yep. And
we need to take
an anonymous link.
It is anonymous. It is anonymous. So fair criticism if you're not happy about that. Whereas at least in Graph, you have to be authorized to get that photo.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
and I think it's a little different between, a personal or a community kind of account and an ID provider that way, and one that is more kind of corporate aligned when we think of going against your Entra ID and the data that might be in there.
Yeah. And that's all fair, right? Like, we're not here to criticize it's just,
no.
But it's important to note that picture's just not sitting in here.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that goes to what you're getting with the OAuth handler, and then the individual implementations for the IDPs. You can make it be what it needs to be, community or more corporate.
Right. So no photo here. So what was the first thing I set out to do? Is I said, okay, I need to get that photo. Like I need to get it. So here's what happens. We won't run through this code too deeply, but this is the trick. This is where it all happens. It's going to parse that JSON that came back, and then remember the map JSON key stuff that allowed us to basically say, hey, this picture value that comes back from Google. Why don't you just make that a claim? And let's call it URN Google Picture. You could call it whatever you wanted, but let's make that claim. And the underlying OAuth handler will automatically for you look through the JSON and make a claim out of this. And I think that's really nice because now it's just hanging on to the user's identity. You don't have to store it in a database or anything. Not that you shouldn't do that. Your mileage is going to be based on what you need. But we couldn't figure out, well, what JSON key do we map for the Microsoft account? There isn't one. So there's more work to do. Let me get through this. And okay, so I am logged in private, but we have some issues. Now, I want to go ahead and let me take a quick detour to GitHub to show you that this code is not hiding from you. If you're wondering how is it that I step through it in Visual Studio, I step through it because I turn on symbol servers, and I'm really aggressive about trying to have the symbols, underlying symbols. Like I'm really aggressive about that so that way I can step through code. It does slow you down a little bit, but when you're trying to learn about what's happening underneath, I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, definitely.
But this code is sitting in the ASP.NET Core repo. This isn't a surprise, okay? So if I go to source and then security and then authentication, here are the 4 providers: Facebook, Microsoft account, Twitter, and the last one was Google. And each of them derives, the account handler derives off of the OAuth handler, which I can click, and then we could just head over to. So what I started doing is looking through, okay, what does the base OAuth handler do? Well, for one thing, it sets up an HTTP client for you. That's kind of nice. They create this set of events that allow them to this allows them to have a standard inheritable way for when they go ahead and make one of these calls, they can await the event for it to return. And that abstracts it from you waiting for the actual operation. And I can see that being useful for this inheritance hierarchy they set up from OAuth handler down to Microsoft handler. Other things that are important in here, all of the claim action stuff, it's all in here. But let's take a look at just the Microsoft one. Okay. What's interesting is the Microsoft account handler is where you're going to see the path of the flow that they use. But if you look at Microsoft account options, this should look familiar. We've been setting these options.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that not only do they set the options, like this is why we put sign in Microsoft in there instead of sign in OIDC. You're going to see other documentation that says use sign in OIDC. Well, it's not using this.
Okay.
So we can override these if we want. And then what's interesting is, look, they're mapping some claim actions, which is kind of neat. Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
So
just to
go ahead.
There are a few comments in the chat. I just want to make sure we address them at some point. I'd like to get to the point where we see it.
Yeah.
And then maybe we come back and do the questions.
Right.
Okay,
cool. So yeah, I'm going to try to skip ahead a little bit, but I expect that I hope this doesn't make it more confusing. Here's the problem. I tried some things, and I will go through the different things I tried. They may or may not still be sitting here in source code. I'm not sure. I don't know that they are. I tried bringing in the Graph API, which would have worked. So I don't want to say that bringing in the Graph API SDK would not have worked. It would have worked. The problem is when and where I was trying to bring it in.
Okay.
I didn't touch the Microsoft handler. So what I did instead is I went to, let's see, let me think about this. In our identity endpoint extensions, I modified code. Oh, actually, maybe this isn't where I did it. Oh, I know where I did it. I'm sorry. I was wrong about that. In our external login. Oh no, you know what? It might be a different app. It might be a different test bed, and I don't know that I want to bring up a lot of them. I tried bringing in the external login code. As soon as I got the claims identity, I said, let me make a graph call here, get the photo, and then add that claim to the existing identity. And that never worked. And I think the reason why is because once the claims identity user is set in ASP.NET Core, I couldn't modify it after the fact.
All right.
I'm not even trying to say that. I don't even really want to say that it's a security issue. A lot of these properties were get properties. So trying to alter them was like, it doesn't do anything. I tried. So basically what I tried doing is saying, when you reach this page, maybe what I'll do is I'll go ahead, as soon as you get to this page, let me go ahead and grab the photo from Graph. I'll stuff it in a claim, because I mean, I could throw it in a database if I wanted to, but now I got to go read the database every time. So I'll put it into a claim in this user identity, and then it'll just be here, but it wasn't working. It wasn't doing anything. The next thing that tripped me up was I said, okay, what if I modified the code that actually comes back in here. So this is just the standard code. When I say in here, this is what you get out of file new project. What if when they come back from the identity endpoint, maybe that's when I'll do it, because we haven't. The problem was, though, is I kept running into this issue where this Microsoft account, there's a key point where your account is being set up, and it is here in the Microsoft account handler right here. Run claim actions I can't get into, create the ticket. And when this ticket is created, the context includes a claims principal ID.
Okay.
And I found that even if I snuck in here and tried to change this stuff, it wasn't doing what I wanted. Like, in other words, if I don't change this code, if I wait until after the Microsoft account handler is run, the ticket's been created and the user's been created in ASP.NET Core, I could not add to the user. So
makes sense.
It kind of makes sense. So I really wish I could put time into demoing that, because I'm afraid that seems a little hand wavy. So why don't we talk about what I've done since people have waited long enough? And the point of this is not to delay at all. I'm not trying to get you to watch. So here's what we did. Here's what I did anyways. So I actually made the decision. Can I derive off the Microsoft account handler and change the implementation to what I want it to do?
Okay.
So this is a little messy, and very astute observers might say, I don't know that you had to do it this way. So as you can see, I am deriving off of the in the box Microsoft account handler, but this is my account handler, Blazor Entra ID photo. I left it in components accounts, and this is my own photo handler. So I'm taking as much of the implementation as I can still use, but I will admit that I cut and paste create ticket async, and then I have my own private method that gets a photo. So you could make the argument, did I really need to do this? Maybe. Because one of the things about create ticket async is I need to get in here and I need to insert myself to do something with this photo. There isn't an extensibility point which would be nice, maybe. It might be an interesting suggestion. There isn't an extensibility point for me to say, while you're creating the ticket, can you also do this other thing too?
Yeah.
That might be very helpful, right? So if we compare the code, if you were to compare the code in here, the code is identical except for a couple pieces. One is I have my own private method that's going to get the photo out as a base 64 string. And then I jump in here between running the claim actions to map all those claims up and creating the ticket. I jump in right here and say, I got one more for you. I got one more. Can you create a claim called URN picture? Could be called whatever you want. Can you take the base 64 string of the photo, drop it in there, add that claim? And now I'm on easy street now because I've got this claim that's going to be available in every page or in perhaps the login component that needs it. And it's not me storing it in a database. It's not me saving it to a file. I am not telling you you should not consider those things for your application. This was how do we get this working in a simpler way that doesn't just add more complexity of, okay, now I got to change the database schema. Now I got to find a place to put it. So that was it. This is the magic.
And it's a way that's kind of analogous to some of the other implementations where that photo is publicly accessible.
Yeah. This is my own. So basically what I've done is I've taken over the Microsoft account handler. Now, that's okay. I don't think it's horrible.
If you're going to own it, own your own implementation of it, right?
Right. So what's the difference in Get Photo? Well, Get Photo, I use a lot of the constructs of the auth handler. They already have an HTTP client set up that's already, and they already have an access token ready. They already have the request ready. So they're already calling the endpoint I want, the user information endpoint that we've defined, but we have to say, oh, by the way, can you go get the photo? And then if it comes back, if the user doesn't have a photo defined, you get a 404 here. So I don't want, I want to return null because Blazor handles that very well, frankly.
Oh, cool.
Blazor handles that null very well. Otherwise, let me take the byte array that comes back, convert it to a base 64 string, and we'll return that. We'll put that in the claim.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't actually end up doing that because I blew up here if I tried to take a null value and add that as a claim. So we're actually short-circuiting the whole conversation and saying, listen, if you got a photo base 64, then great. Then go ahead and use that. So I know we've gotten some great comments, and here's where I will be the first to say, I imagine there are other ways to do this, and they might even be cleaner. They might be better. So we learn from you folks as well. And I think it's interesting that Alan's saying I use an I claims transformation to add new claims during the login progress. And I'll be honest, that's something that I haven't run across yet. Have I seen the I claims transformation interface? Yes, but I wasn't sure. I just hadn't come across how to use it. So let's see. What other changes have I made? Well, this is the same. We chose our own Microsoft account handler instead.
Right.
And then our identity endpoint extensions. This is basically me short-circuiting all the code that comes in the box by only providing the identity endpoints that we need. We've covered this on earlier shows. So I have an ability to log out. I have an ability to perform the Microsoft login. I even have the Google login in here, even though we're not using it. And then I have my own component. This is the external login for Microsoft. It's just a button, and it's just a button that redirects you to perform Microsoft login, which is going to start the challenge. I have my own logout that does really nothing more than just calls logout. I actually have forgotten if I really need this or if we were using it to dive into the HTTP context. That might have been what we were using this code for. I'm not even, I actually forget. And as you can see, I didn't pull it out to double check. But this is a very stripped down version where we are not using everything that comes in the box. I have my own Microsoft account handler. And I guess it's It's building, which is fine. Here's the part where like this is all going to work, right? So with my own personal MSA, it logs in, and when I go to the auth required page, it shows me the user claims, and the one that's really important is this one does end up matching up what's in the Entra ID. That's super important. You need that identifier. But notice that URN picture didn't come up, and it's because it wasn't found. I don't have one for this user.
Oh, that's true. Right.
So that all worked out as designed. If I head over to, I need an in private window, just because it'll be easier for me to log in and use the user that we know has, boy, if I could only spell. Doesn't really matter what I do there. Okay, so we're authorized, and if I go to auth requested, we get the extra claim.
Yeah.
And then the code on this page, which I'll show you in a second, it looks for this claim, and if the claim exists, it just pops the picture up here. This could be in a component. This could be in a component that's sitting in that awesome upper right space.
Yep.
So if I
go, just the base 64 that came back of the image, right? That's right. String that was there. Okay.
Yeah. So let me go to the page. This shouldn't be too complicated. I'm just throwing out each claim, and then double checking. Well, do you have this claim that I'm looking for? And if you are, then simple HTML that you may or may not be aware of that says with this little prefix is telling it what's to come is base 64, and that's it.
That's so cool because I've seen that has claim. The has claim be used for permissions, right? Do you have a claim to access this feature in the application? Here we're just saying, do you have a claim that is your image?
Yeah.
So kind of a slightly different spin. I mean, same functionality, but a different way of using it.
Yeah. So I would love to take this moment to go through some of the ideas here.
And thank you all in the chat for
this is great discussion.
This is awesome. Yeah,
this is really great discussion. So, I will go through. I think that I may be able to talk about this. I had problems with authorization from our Entra ID, but could get authentication to work well.
Could not get.
So could not get. Yeah. So I get our users authenticated and ran a class to set my own authorizations based on group claims. Okay. So something I didn't show you today. Remember how I told you one way I tried to address this was by having my own class that outside after the authentication process went and got the photo based on that ID and then tried to add it to the identity. Look, I could have continued down that path and then said, well, let me go save this off in a user database. But then it was everything I talked about. Now I got to go modify that database. Then we got to show that. And that may not be good for every app. You can do that, and there's nothing wrong with you doing that. But one important note about that is when you call Graph API on your own as the app, that is not the delegated permission.
Right.
So I actually had to modify my call to say, Graph users, here's the user ID I want you to go get. You may have noticed that because I'm piggybacking on the account handler that's in the box for ASP.NET, and I think there's 3 general ways to go about doing this that are in the box, so to speak, in the .NET world. We'll talk through them. But this is in the box. When I say in the box, I mean it's in the ASP.NET Core platform. It's in the it's in the GitHub repo. So it's kind of like this is what they shipped to get you going. That particular implementation, they're using the delegated auth of you because you've just signed in. You've just signed in using OAuth. So you get back an access token. That access token is delegating my permissions to you, the app. So if I reuse that access token and I've set up the Entra ID application for the delegated permission, I can read your user's profile as much or as little as the administrator has allowed.
Sure.
So what that means is all I needed was user read. That's all I needed.
Which keeps permissions light.
Which is nice and light, right? Whereas when I got this sort of working, I do have this working in a sense of where go and use the stuff that's in the box, then make a secondary call after you come back based on your user ID, based on that name identifier, make a second call, go out and get the picture that way. I had to go into my Entra ID and add an app permission to Graph, which basically means I can read anybody I want as long as I know the name identifier. Heck, I don't even need that. I could just start listing out users. Now, is that okay at work? Maybe. It's becoming less and less okay as you think about maybe what is the application, right? Is it is it everybody in a 10,000 person org? Are you building something that you might want to put up on GitHub so that other people can use? Like, it's like all security. It's a trade-off. You decide,
Yeah. I mean, think about the use case, right? It's getting the image of the logged in user.
Right.
So there's no reason to be in a state where you get access to all users.
Yeah. And I will admit that I'm passionate about least privilege.
Yep.
So another thing that you may have run into, and I hate that I'm going to be describing this out loud and not have a great way to show you, because, as I figured out things weren't going to work, I moved on. If you are using, let's say that you do everything I did today and you say that this is awesome. I'm going to, but I still want to use all this stuff. I still want to use the identity cookies and identity core. I want to add identity core. Here's what's really interesting. If you've gone through this path before for an external login for your website using the Blazor web app and individual accounts, I know I said a mouthful there. When you log in with the external provider, what's the first thing the site makes you do? Is it says, oh, welcome. What's an email address that I could use?
Yeah.
Okay, what it's really doing there is it's creating a user in the same database that it would have put users in the sign-in approach, the username and password approach, the one that comes with. So there's a problem. The problem is when you go look at the user's claims that are made there, for that user doesn't have the Entra ID, not by default, it doesn't have the Entra ID name identifier in it. It has your app's name identifier in it. So it's not wrong. You go call the photo API with that name identifier and you start scratching your head going like, why is it not found? How can it be not found? It's like, it's a different name identifier. It's a different GUID. Your app created its own app identification using the stuff that's built in.
Okay.
It created its own app identification and it put that into the user claims. And it said, well, this is what you want, right? Your own user.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, well, now I'm kind of back at square one where I'm going to have to go get the photo. I'm going to have to add it to the schema. We're going to have to do a data migration, which I think is all fine and good. And how do we demonstrate that quickly? So, I think I don't want to impress upon people that the only way to do this is to take over the handler, but I want to give you some food for thought because I've been looking around at, I'm sorry that I'm trying to find which web page this is actually in here because I've got a ton of things open. Here we go. For the longest time, the only way that I could find code that discussed this was either, this Microsoft account external login setup with ASP.NET Core, and we learned by looking through the code. There are some new documentation pages now. Configure OpenID Connect Web Authentication in ASP.NET Core. This is a very new article.
Yeah.
And you can follow this through and it works well. And then when you're done, you're going to be in the same spot where you say like, well, now I got to go get the photo. But it doesn't mean you can't do it. This does things differently. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just does it differently. And it uses, it doesn't use the Graph API SDK, but it does use the Graph API. And so what I did is I said, well, where is that? Well, that's sitting out here at .NET Blazor samples. So earlier you've seen me in .NET ASP.NET Core. This is a repo called Blazor samples. I do recommend learning from this code. Down in 9.0, we now have 4 samples that I think are worth looking at here. The Blazor web app Entra, which is really lightweight, and I didn't learn a ton from. It's a super, super lightweight, like bare minimum.
Okay.
This OIDC is what that particular Learn article is talking about. Is instead of even relying on the Microsoft handler, this just does it straight OIDC. It basically says, I'm enough of an expert that I know how to use OpenID Connect. I'll map the claims, no big deal. I learned a lot from this particular sample. I really did. It basically comes in here, and so there's none of the handlers that are built into ASP.NET Core are used. Those are not used. Instead, it says add authentication, and it turns out this is a Microsoft OIDC constant that they use over and over. They set options. And what's really neat about this sample is the sample says, okay, from here on out, you're going to see commented out lines of code. If you're just going to use this is the default, so you don't have to uncomment it. But if you need to change this default, now you got to take over.
Okay. That's
what this code is saying. This code is saying, like, look, this is already the default. This is already the default, but if you got to change it, great. And oh, by the way, you're going to want to put your tenant in here. You're going to want to put your client ID in here. What was a little tricky about this is if you look through this code, and maybe this is a suggestion I can make in the repo, is it's not plainly obvious where and how to store the client secret. Even when you read their README, I found it to not be plainly obvious. However, they do say the article for this app is here, so I'm going to be fair.
Okay.
And as you go through this tutorial, they're going to tell you exactly where to set the secret. They're going to set it this way, and they recommend using the secret manager tool. We've used this tool and broken it down enough that we know how to break this into the JSON and secrets.json, that it's just the hierarchy. We know that. Yeah. But if you don't know, then you follow along with this, you're going to get the same result.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that this is a bad sample. It's a great sample. I just found that I was a little torn as to, is the README telling me enough to do what to do? Or is the comments telling me what to do? Or is the article telling me what to do? And the answer is kind of like, you kind of got to read through them all.
It's kind of interesting because there's, when you go through, at least when I think about the OIDC, there are other use cases where we're using, I got to double check to make sure it's the right one, but like when we do an action in GitHub and we want to go ahead and have that action have the ability to connect to an Azure environment, let's say, we use, I'm pretty sure it's an OIDC connection in that you don't store, all you store is the tenant and the client ID. You don't store a secret over there.
Oh, right.
Because you've basically federated, and I have
Yep.
to choose,
Yep.
I'm not sure that's the right word, but you've basically
Nope.
federated that, hey, this has the ability to go ahead and you don't have to worry about capturing that secret anywhere.
Yep. Now, remember, here's something I'd love to explore. When we did this the other day, I can't remember what our use case was exactly, but we were following along with a different sample where instead of, let's see, I don't actually know if it matters which one we're using here. It might be this one. That when you say certificates and secrets, we have been using secrets again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
But you can put in a certificate, and we went through that process.
Yeah.
We created a self-signed cert. The app knew the app had the cert. The thumbprint was put in here. Actually, no, this had the cert. I guess the app had the cert too. The app had the cert too. But because it was local, in order to tell, I think what you're doing is you're telling the API. You're basically telling it, oh, by the way, here's the thumbprint I've got, and then it matches it up. And so you can do that. And this, I think, is what you're talking about. Allow other identities to impersonate this application. So the way this would work, which we've never tried, is this would be now having your app run with an app identity. We haven't taken that step.
Okay.
And I think probably the reason we haven't taken that step, I'm going to take a guess, is that for one thing, the client secret allows us to run this local host. I don't think we'd be able to create an identity and then continue developing localhost. Am I right about that? Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. But I agree with you that we should be able to take our app, move it up to Azure, give it an app identity, add the credential here. We'd have to have the code be smart enough for us to tell it, like, use the federated credential instead of client secret. And then one way would be for the develop. I think, boy, I would love to know if I'm wrong about this. One way would be for your local development using a client secret. The other way would be in production using a federated credential. I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we can do that and continue developing locally. But I could be wrong, and so I don't want to stress that too hard, right? Like, we're both thinking about it, going, how?
Well, so I'm thinking, yeah. So we can think, how can we do it in our code? But then I'm thinking, well, is this a place where Aspire can help?
Right. Sure. Yeah. I hear you.
I don't know that that's outside the swim lane because it's authentication and not services.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. I would love to ask you and our friends in chat.
Yeah.
Did any of this help? Because my biggest fear after getting it all working is I said, I want to explain why other things weren't working for me. I finally broke down and derived off of Microsoft Account Handler. That did work. That doesn't mean I'm satisfied. But I did say to myself, okay, I appreciated that I could use framework and a pattern that already works, the Microsoft Account Handler pattern that's built into the framework, built into the platform. I had to insert myself in a couple places. Now, maybe with a little bit of cleverness, I might take a harder look at this and go, maybe I don't have to insert myself into create ticket async. Maybe I can do it somewhere else that's a little cleaner.
Yeah.
But as you can see, I basically overrode create ticket async and said, let's do everything we're doing before, except while you're here, go get the photo. Why am I passing tokens? And I could do better than this. Instead of passing the whole tokens, I could just pass the token I need.
Sure.
And I could say, okay, here, call graph again, get the value out, save it as base 64, add that as a claim, and boom, we have something that our components can use.
Yeah. No, I mean, as you said in going through some of the comments, right, there are multiple ways to do this. This is a way that I think feels right, given what you own in the code and what might be available for you to extend, modify, what have you, because it's your code. I think as you're going through it, it does seem like a plausible way of doing it.
So
cool. Good point.
I like this point. I'm not a fan of the solution, though I see it as a possible solution. I was under the impression that Graph SDK was a recommended approach. Okay, so let me make it clear that I believe fully that I could implement this with the Graph SDK.
Yeah.
In some respect, I am using Graph. This is just a REST call back to Graph. The account handler is already doing that. It's doing it here, the user information endpoint. How do I know the user information endpoint is Graph? Well, number one, we did not override it. We overrode token and authorization for our own tenant, and that's sitting in secrets.json. I don't know that it's necessarily secret, but that's where I put it. But if we go back to the source code, Microsoft account source, in the Microsoft account defaults, the user information endpoint is Graph, but it is the user's Graph /me. So delegated permission. I'm positive, although again, like you said, we put time into this. I could take this out. I could include the Graph SDK. and call the Graph SDK with the same exact, it would just be graphs.me.photo, and I would get out a stream because I've done it. I would get out a stream. In fact, I think I have another sample that does it. I just don't know that we can walk through it. And the problem that I was having is not that there was anything wrong with Graph API. It was that when I was trying to do it outside the bounds of what was already in the box for external login, without taking over the whole process, I was still trying to use add Microsoft account, which you could argue is part of the problem. I was still trying to use add Microsoft account, and then I just wanted to do one more thing and get it added to the user. I don't know that I want to call Graph SDK over and over and over and over again. I want to call it the number of times that makes sense, which might be when you log in. You could make the argument, well, what if they change their photo? I get it. Sometimes that's a frustrating experience for a user. Maybe when they do, maybe if you get a refresh token, I'm not sure how to deal with it there. So I guess my argument here is that we still use Graph, but yes, it could be re-implemented to use the Graph SDK. I would say, though, that maybe part of what you're saying is, I don't know if I want to own this. That's a fair statement. I kind of took the approach today of let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Microsoft Account Handler is doing what I want. I just wish it did a little more. That's why I wanted to point out these other samples. These other samples, I believe, because they don't use the in the box. They don't use the in the box approach. That when you look at this other sample, this is kind of leading towards the, okay, when we do our sign in, let's go ahead, and I think this is where you would do it. Do the sign in and then go ahead and say, okay, while I'm here, let me make this extra call, maybe add it to a claim. I kind of like the claim approach, but I understand the arguments. I also am with you on this. I prefer composition over inheritance. The reason why inheritance was used, and again, somebody more clever might be able to say, hey, you didn't have to do what you did, is I felt I needed to cut into this process because this process both creates the ticket and returns it, and there's nowhere for me to jump in and say, okay, hold on. You've created, it creates this context that gets used to create the ticket, this OAuth creating ticket context. If maybe I can jump in here, maybe there's another way to jump in that keeps this as composition, because believe me, I'm with you. I am not thrilled. But if a class is closed for extension, then I'm not sure what option we have. And I want to say, everybody here understands that, we have our jobs and the things that we do. This is off time. In fact, kind of late at night. Could I have done something different? That's what I would love for you folks to maybe let me know, right? Like, hey, you didn't have to do this. It is extensible here, and you could have accomplished what you wanted. I would love that. I would love that. And I probably take a look at it a little bit too. That's kind of why I was hoping this was ready for GitHub, but it's not. So, because then, it's something that we could talk about in the future, but.
So what makes it not ready for GitHub?
So it has nothing to do with this solution.
Okay.
The branch that I'm working on also has a lot of the other solutions that along the way I was trying to figure things out. And when I got really desperate and wasn't sure what was going on, client secret was just getting put in the code so I could say, okay, hold on. I want to isolate the graph call. I'm not, you know what? I just don't feel like adding this to secrets JSON right now and setting all that up. So let me just do it here.
Gotcha.
So I can't commit until I clean up basically this commit. I could have, it was pretty late last night. I could have said, okay, let me just commit this solution. Again, being, how I use Git. I could have done it, but I said, you know what? I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to get it wrong. And I don't want to get it wrong and find myself having committed a secret up there. So,
totally. That makes total sense. Don't want to. Yeah, I'm with you.
So I just said, okay. here's what I love, and this is what I love about this, is that when you share a project, I'd love to be. So we will do that. We will do that, and I would love to know, what worked for you. I'm glad that you have something working. And again, I think there's probably multiple ways to do this. There is the Graph SDK. There's also the MSAL, which we tried. Right. And there was nothing wrong with the MSAL. It was that we kind of ran into the same things of like, okay, well, we're using the MSAL, but we keep getting exceptions back or not found, and why. And I think I really do think it had to do with using both the MSAL or the Graph SDK as the app and not as the user. And making sure we get that correct name identifier, which I think was hurting us one time, is because we were using the built-in ASP.NET stuff, the name identifier coming back was from our database. It was not from the Entra ID. So we're asking Entra ID for some random GUID, and it's like, I don't know. Yeah, who's that? And I wish I could have shown all that, but you kind of see that was a lot of the process. And also don't want it to be too confusing.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Yeah, I kind of wonder. I kind of wonder if there's a way to make one user endpoint call still and get back the picture as a base 64, delegated and all, and then I'm done. Instead of like, oh yeah, okay, make another call for the photo. I don't know that answer. Maybe that's something we can ask around about, or so on.
We could dig into that. But yeah, I agree and that was how with the Graph SDK route was how we were looking when we got stuck on the first day that we did this. What's the what's the way to go ahead and call the graph and make that happen? So
yeah. So like I said, I appreciate the sentiment here. I've totally enjoyed the process, because definitely what you get with us is process a lot. And I think there's two reasons for that. One is that we tend to do some things live. And the other is that there's plenty of great samples out there that cut to the chase. And I have often found myself afterwards scratching my head saying, like, this sample's great. I feel like I need to understand a little bit more to use this in a production solution, because my app is A, or it's B, or it's in this scenario and it's slightly different. And so I think a lot, try to think about how can you actually take this to work, or can you gain enough understanding to feel comfortable?
Right.
So that's where we're at. So a solution, a working sample. We'll get this up on GitHub. We'll let people iterate on it, and love to talk about it in issues, and we can even discuss it here.
Yeah, definitely. When it's up there, we'll put a link in the show notes below so that it is available. But yeah, let's see. Go back to here. Oh,
it didn't remove that. Interesting.
That was me. I hit the wrong button.
Oh, okay.
Is it this one?
There it is.
There it is. So yeah, I didn't do the C, and I hit the old habit of the little buttons at the bottom.
I know.
So my fault.
No, it's not your fault. It's a brand new feature that I saw today.
Yeah. So we must try this and see what happens. But
yeah,
awesome. Well, I appreciate you walking through that, and it sounds like there's a lot of that one's me.
Oh, that was you? Because I was going to say, what happened here?
Yeah, that was where we started. So going all the way back to the beginning, that was how we started.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know why my camera keeps doing that. That's annoying. It just seems to want to. Maybe it's me. Maybe I have a loose wire here as well. Cool. So thanks, Chris, for doing that. Thank you so much, everyone in the comments and those who are hanging around watching. And if you're watching in the future, we'd love to hear your thoughts and comments as well. I think, can I do this? There we go.
Oh, cool.
Thinking about things that are up there. So if you're watching in the future, or you're watching live and you want to know where the future stuff is, you can hit the link down below for all of our stuff that we've been doing over the last 5 years up on YouTube, and all that content there. If you watch a video, give us a thumbs up and a like, if just to let us know about engagement, but also drop a comment, because we do want to hear your thoughts and how we can do better. And and that's how we got these last couple of shows, is that comment from Alan being
Yeah.
able to come back and say, hey, what about this? And we'll love to, drop a comment. We'd love to dive into it and see how we can help and keep you all conversating with us. So so with that, I think that's a show. We can certainly wrap up. So
Yep.
Chris, thanks so much for doing that, and great having that conversation here. And I always have trouble ending the show. Like, what's the right way to end the show? But so with that, I will say, for Chris, my name is Rich, and I appreciate you all joining us. And we'll see you next time on the Dev Talk Show.
Huh, interesting. As you can see, we're learning.
That one. There we go.